Imagine living in a place where everything was permitted, where wealth brought any pleasure and parties lasted for days without worrying about tomorrow. Sodom and Gomorrah were true centers of luxury, ostentation, and excess. But behind the luxurious mansions and grand temples, there was a society corrupted by violence, betrayal, and perversion. Women were treated as mere merchandise, children were sacrificed in macabre rituals, and the poor were abandoned to their fate in the streets. Until one day everything was consumed by fire. The city of wealth and pride, Sodom, was a prosperous commercial center, strategically located near the Dead Sea, with fertile lands that allowed for abundant agriculture. Caravans came from distant regions, bringing gold, silver, and rare spices. The streets were bustling, filled with artisans, goldsmiths, and merchants displaying their most valuable products. The rich lived in luxurious houses of polished stone, decorated with fine fabrics and imported sculptures. In the city center, imposing palaces reflected the power of its most influential inhabitants. Parties were frequent and filled with wine, while extravagant banquets served food in abundance. But there was another side to this prosperity, glaring inequality. While the rich feasted, the poor starved without any compassion. Kindness was seen as weakness, and selfishness ruled the city. Trade was marked by greed, and even counterfeit weights were used to deceive buyers. If someone fell into debt, they could be sold into slavery to pay off their debts. Justice favored only the powerful, and the humble were left without any recourse. A society corrupted by lust. On the outside, Sodom shone as an example of advanced civilization. On the inside, it was a place where arrogance and exploitation reigned. The streets were lined with pagan temples, where dark rituals were performed in the name of gods of fertility and pleasure. These ceremonies involved wild parties, orgies, and practices considered immoral. Marriage was treated with disdain, and fidelity was ridiculed. The city became a stronghold of absolute hedonism, where the pursuit of pleasure was the only law. The nights were dominated by music, dancing, and drinking. Wealthy men were accompanied by servants and slaves, many of whom were forced to satisfy the desires of their masters. Relationships were based on interest and convenience rather than true love. The concept of commitment had disappeared, giving way to a society obsessed with new experiences and momentary pleasures. Violence and the absence of laws. If during the day Sodom was a bustling marketplace, at night its streets became a hunting ground. Anyone who dared to walk alone was the target of robberies, beatings, and murder. The judges were corrupt, favoring the wealthy, while the poor were ridiculed for seeking justice. Foreigners were treated with hostility and often suffered brutal attacks for no reason. Violence was not only permitted, but encouraged. Young men were trained to despise the weak, and brutal games were held to entertain the powerful. Prisoners and slaves were used in bloody spectacles, where their lives were discarded without any value. In the dark alleys, women and children were the most vulnerable, with no protection from the abuses they suffered. Judgment Day. The people of Sodom believed themselves invincible. They trusted in their wealth and the high walls that surrounded the city, but the fate of these cities was already sealed. One fateful night, two mysterious travelers arrived, attracting the attention of the inhabitants. What few knew was that they were angels sent to execute divine judgment. When the inhabitants tried to attack them, a blinding light blinded them, and it became clear that Sodom's time had come to an end. The angels gave a final warning to Lot, one of the few righteous. People still living there, flee and do not look back. At dawn, flames fell from the sky. The fire consumed everything it touched. Palaces crumbled, temples were destroyed, and marketplaces turned to ashes. Those who tried to flee were overtaken by fire and reduced to nothing. Among the fugitives, Lot's wife could not resist temptation and looked back. Instantly, she was turned into a pillar of salt. She still belonged to Sodom, and so she shared its fate. What was left of the city that was once an icon of wealth and arrogance? Only a charred wasteland, lifeless, without hope. A reminder of what happens when a society rejects justice and morality. A remembrance for the present. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is a powerful warning that no civilization survives when it gives itself completely to corruption, selfishness, and arrogance. Wealth can create an illusion of security, but when fundamental principles are violated, abandoned, destruction becomes inevitable. If this story impacted you, leave your like now and share your thoughts in the comments. True prosperity is not found in material wealth, but in a life based on justice, faith, and compassion. May we learn from the past so as not to repeat its mistakes.